So I'm here hanging out with Andrew Banks at his lovely home in Sydney, and tell us a bit about yourself.
Well, came here from England at the age of 20, 10-pound pom. Loved Australia as soon as I landed. What does a partly qualified applied biologist come actor do? He goes into human resources, and then I got into recruitment and had a very successful and enjoyable career in getting other people jobs. And that led to sales and going public and online jobs, monster.com. And now I'm an investor, a producer, and like working with startups and innovation.
So Andrew, why did you start your first business, and when did that happen?
That happened in 1984, my first business on my own, really, which was Morgan & Banks. And why did it happen? Probably like a lot of people's journey, events sort of came to fruition because of a bunch of things that happened before, and I was really compelled to go out on my own. I'd worked for someone else. I'd learned how to run a good recruiting company. I realized I liked it, and I realized I could make money at it. And rather than stick around with a company that was probably finding it hard to change and didn't want to do things the way I thought the future needed them to be done, go out on your own. Give it a shot.
And was there a point where you realized, obviously you're working for someone else, was there a point when you realized, I should really go out on my own and do my own thing? I mean, was that something you were thinking about for a long time, or how did that come about?
Not really. In a way, and we're still good friends. I work for Jeff Slade of Slade Consulting. His business is still going, and no hard feelings, but Jeff and I had an understanding that if I did certain things, I'd take some equity in his company and keep going. And when that time came, I think Jeff had certain advice that that's probably not what he should do, or not as much equity. So suddenly when something happens to you in life, that's often a favor. You think it's a problem, but it's not. So it just made me stop and reflect. And I think, frankly, had I not done that, I might still be working with Jeff or doing something else. It's like a lot of people I've interviewed in companies, It needs something to come out of left base to make them say, should I still be doing this job? I'm working here, should I move jobs, or should I start a business? So I had an event like that, no hard feelings, and within a week, a very nice bank by the name of Westpac today, New South Wales in those days, had given me an overdraft of 200,000. So I thought, well, I might as well risk it all and do my own thing.
Excellent. And you've done a lot of things since then. Obviously, you've grown and sold and floated a lot of companies, and been extremely successful each and every time. I mean, do you think there were some secrets that you have stumbled upon, or you learnt early on that made you successful?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that success has a lot of owners, and failures has none. I would agree that in the end, we made it successful, sometimes on my own, mostly with other people, partners, Morgan obviously in Morgan & Banks and in other businesses. But the trick to success is that you get 70% of it right. So I'd hate anyone to think I got 100% of everything I did right, because that's rubbish. No one ever does that. In fact, if someone told me that in an interview, I wouldn't believe it. And that's an important point in itself. You've got to get the right things done well. And you can screw up on the small things, or you can screw up once or twice, just not too often. And you've got to learn by your mistakes. I think the key things around success are you don't go into anything you don't really understand, so you get a lot of knowledge. You, in effect, need to develop mastery of a topic or a business or an area, really know it well. And then you look at what the competition's doing, and you work out, how can I do it better? It's not rocket science, actually. You look for the gaps. And where do you find the gaps? You ask the customer. You talk to people and you say, what is it that you don't get from a recruiting company that you wished you did get, or whatever business it is you're in? Or maybe you're a customer yourself. And so filling those gaps, applying yourself, and having mastery are the secrets of success.
Right. It's very profound, coming from you, that, going to your customer and asking them, it's not something that a lot of people even think about doing.
Amazing. All my best ideas came from customers. 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen twice as often as you speak. And listen and be curious. And, even though I'm 65, going on 40 at the moment, I hope I never stop being curious and never stop wanting to learn. Because to me, that would be almost like, writing myself off.
And besides listening to customers, obviously being always ever curious, open to listening to people and taking their ideas and really thinking about them, what are the things you think that people, when they go into business, they're not really aware of and end up making mistakes?
Well, I think one that surprised me is cash flow, because I always thought cash was important, but I've seen a lot of great businesses sell themselves almost into bankruptcy because they sell an invoice out and they say, look at our sales this month, look at our sales next month, but then they don't look at their expenses and cash flow. So I used to get a small piece of paper, just 2 inches by 2 inches every Friday from my accountant in the early days of my own business, and it had a few simple numbers on it: cash in, cash out, bank statement, and sales was down the bottom, because sales is a theoretical number. I think I've sold it, I've sent an invoice, but I don't know if I'm going to get paid. So I think cash flow, very important. It's the oxygen of corporate life. It's the oxygen of a business. So keep your cash flow monitoring, and then you can decide whether to hit the accelerator, which means when you're growing a business, you're using more cash. Sometimes you actually have to hit the brake.
Right.
And slow the business down, collect some cash for a month or two, don't do anything new, make sure the bank's nice and happy with you, and then hit the accelerator again.
Okay.
So I feel that in my gut almost when I'm running a business, I can just feel cash flow. And even when we were frankly nearly 900 million in sales, I never stopped worrying about cash. And every week I would want to know what the cash business was doing, the balances, and where the accounts receivable were, and I could predict roughly how much cash we'd have 60 or 90 days ahead.
So what are some of the earliest memories of any challenges that you were facing in the early days?
I think when you first start a business and you've got 3 people and then 10 people and then 20 people, you feel like the guy spinning the plates, running up and down. It's the randomity of a new business with so many different things happening. And so I developed this concept in my head, which I call LST,
right.
Logical, sequential, tactical. And so imagine this guy running up and down, spinning the plates. And it's a question of knowing which plate you might allow to fall has got to be the least important. So I think it's very important to manage your diary, manage what's going on in your day. And I do see my earlier sort of troubles and struggles were I didn't quite get that right. Okay. So I'd spend too much time on something because it interested me or because the person was there when I really should have been over here spending more time on that. So getting that right was difficult, but once I got it right, I then had a framework, and I think that helped me scale the business going forward.
You're obviously involved in a lot of companies. You grew a lot of successful companies, and now one of the big things you're doing is obviously investing in companies and in different areas. If you were to pick the best type of company in terms of attributes, what would it be, and what are some of those attributes?
Well, from a distance, I'm not interested in a small business growing slowly. So I would look at scale. Is this business scalable? So that's the old concept of what is possible. So not how do I get this to grow 10% a year, but if everything went right, how big could this be? Right. So that's at a 60,000 foot view, at a distance. When I'm up close and personal to a business that I'm investing in, I'm looking at the intersection between the entrepreneur and their talent, their passion, and then what the world wants, what's in the market, what's the demand. So I want to see a real intersection between ability, passion, and demand. And if I see a sweet spot there and go, yeah, this person really knows what they're doing, they're passionate about it, and the world wants what they have to offer, well, that's a big tick.
Sounds simple.
Yeah. Well, like a lot of things in life, it's simple at that stage. Of course, execution, as we all know in business, is the next part. And I think that's where business is tougher, where you have to take your idea and make it work. And that's often a journey.
Yeah. So you've obviously interviewed a lot of, successful business owners and entrepreneurs, and you've obviously been investing in companies for a while. What do you think are the key components of a successful person?
Well, that's a broader question. I think I definitely look for emotional stability. I think if you're clever and brilliant, but you can't get up every day, and basically it's a bit like show business, I used to feel when I went into my business, and I see this in a lot of successful CEOs, they don't take their own problems, their own life, their own ups and downs. We all have things that we worry about at home. We have health issues, we have kids, grandparents, whatever it is. So I think there's an emotional stability about successful people where they're really professional, and when they're at work or with a customer or with their team, that's what they're about. And everything else is pushed to the back. That's an important thing. I then look for mental agility. I wouldn't call it intelligence because I think that's a bit narrow. Mental agility, they're smart, they're quick, and they know what they're doing, and their communication cycle is fast. And you can see that they're in tune and in the moment. So that's important. And then I analyze the idea. Are they selling a service or a product that the world wants and needs? Is there a gap? Have they thought through the detail? And when you put all those things together, you see sustained success. So I think the happy, balanced CEO or entrepreneur that just keeps winning and doing well, has that sort of characteristic about them. And that's how they sustain success.
Obviously, business is extremely difficult and probably one of the most difficult careers someone could pursue. And all the challenges that people have, obviously persistence is a key criteria as well, would you say?
Well, I haven't found business difficult. Now, I don't mean that in a cocky or arrogant way, but it suited me. I think working for other people might have been harder for me. I've worked for myself for 35 years. Not that I thought I was smarter than them or better than them. I think I was a pretty good employee. I worked for a big company before, Jeff Slade, 50,000 people around the world, a big construction company, and I was able to take orders and do what I was told. For me, business was just felt right. Persistence absolutely is important in the sense that you can't keep chopping and changing. You might try new ideas, but you've got to do it in a consistent way. And yes, there's no doubt that you will have days, weeks, even months where you don't feel you're doing that well. The toughest thing for me, I think, in Morgan and Banks, and Talent too, which were both 1,500 to 2,500 employees, was when people left. It's funny. I'm in the recruiting business, and here I am making a living out of turnover, but I hated it when people came in and resigned, and I used to take it very personally and think, have I let you down? Have I done something wrong? But then I realized that was just a normal cycle of life, and I learned to let go and let people go graciously. And I have to say that now, when I meet people who used to work for either Morgan and Banks or Talent 2, they tell me they had a good time and there's absolutely no hard feelings, and they went on to do things, and new people came along who did a very good job as well. But you do get emotionally engaged, I think, with your team. And the persistence for me was moving through that, not getting caught up, hiring new people, and realizing that you were always hiring people, training them to leave. I mean, if you were really doing a great job, and they stayed with you 2 or 3 years and then went on to do something else, that was actually a successful formula.
If you had to roll everything up that you've got and invest it into one startup, what would be the thing that would excite you the most?
Well, I think whilst we've already seen a lot of activity in the online education space, I really think our global education model is a bit broken. You can get good content anywhere. And so I believe in a world where teachers are probably less wedded to the content, an English teacher or a geography teacher or a chemistry professor, and more about the process of learning. So I'd love to have a global business that you could have any topic, you could get the best global content that was freely available because someone's done a great lecture on everything you can ever imagine. And have a very effective method of people being able to grab the best content they could but learn through this combination of great local teaching and online content. I think that model is going to disrupt schools, kindergartens and universities of the future. So I'm very excited about that space.
Success and money has, caused some people to find trouble in their personal lives. What do you think people can do to really maintain that stability in their personal lives when they are extremely successful? Yeah,
I think a lot of that has a bit to do with who you are and probably a bit how you were brought up. But I think it's a very interesting concept that the thing that gets you to be successful is a lot of other people's help on the way up, right? And staying in communication with those people. And I've noticed that sometimes people who might be described as arrogant or a bit aloof just because they've made some money or been successful actually end up getting miserable. I grew up in a family where, you were taught at a pretty early age to respect everyone and never to take anything for granted, and to understand that your individual success is always a byproduct of lots of other people. And so I think reminding yourself that really at the end of the day, it's just you. You're basically just an ordinary person who's had some great opportunity. And if you start to allow that to get into your head and make you think that you are somehow better or different or separated from others, it will absolutely sabotage your success going forward, and it'll make you miserable. I mean, who wants to be aloof and alone and sitting on an island, congratulating yourself when no one wants to talk to you because, you're arrogant or unapproachable. So I never understood that, and I think you have to work at it. You have to keep reminding yourself that, that the better you are, the more grounded you should be. And I think if you look around at some global politicians as we speak, or some famous people, you'll make a quick decision about some people have let success affect them and they become a bit odd, and other people are very grounded and normal. And they're the ones you want to deal with, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm for grounded and normal.
Sounds good. If you could go back in time and start again, what would you do differently?
I think there's one particular crossroads that people who know me, we developed the web in '96, and that was one of the reasons why we were merged with Monster.com in '98, and that became a very successful web business. But I remember thinking I really should have got a consultant from outside my business in to look at it. And I think in those days, in the mid-90s, I was probably a bit too reluctant to spend the money and get an external viewpoint. Had I done that, I probably would have separated the two businesses, bricks from clicks, and they would have been equally successful, but in a different way. So I think, knowing what I know now, I would have taken some external, objective, strategic advice earlier, and I think it would have helped. Wouldn't have changed the world, but it would have helped.
That's interesting. And how important is it for people, for business owners, to get external, consultants or perspectives or mentors, whatever you want to call it? How important is that? And where would you find someone that that's best suited for you? I
think it's very important, but of course, why are people reluctant? Because you've got to make the right choice. It's like choosing a mentor. So I think it's very important to not listen to your own voice, to share your ideas, but bounce them off others, have an advisory board, have a consultant. Choosing the right one and picking the right topic is the trick. And that only the entrepreneur can do to themselves. But I also think it's one of the reasons why businesses don't scale. I think entrepreneurs tend to fall in love with their own idea. They see their own businesses as their own baby, and they start to feel reinforced by its success and don't let go. I always thought the irony of Morgan & Banks, which was the first client-led business, was that the minute I won over a new customer, I had to push them down the line. I had to actually get them away from me.
Right.
And I had to keep pushing myself up in the organization and delegating, pushing up and delegating. And suddenly you look back and there's 2,000 people. And that's how you scale a business. But if you say, James only wants me to deal with him, or I've got to do this myself, or only I know how this part of my business works. Once you start talking about I, not we, you're never going to scale your business, because you're just too in love with the process and why it's making you feel good, instead of scaling it so that you can service 10 times as many customers. So it's an interesting issue. You've got to be in love with your business, but then clinical enough to compartmentalize it and push it away from you. It's ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I guess it comes into what you're talking about, people who are successful become arrogant. I guess there's a certain level of arrogance if you think you're the only one that can do the job.
Exactly. And so if you want your business to be more valuable, you have to have a strong management team, which means you have to hire people, train them, and create a succession plan. Because if someone wants to come along and buy your business and you are the center of your business and it won't work as well without you, it's not as valuable as if you're totally dispensable. How amazing is that?
Yeah.
Say that to an entrepreneur. Make yourself indispensable and your business is worth twice as much. Not good for the ego, but very good for the valuation.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, Andrew. Obviously, you have amazing wealth of advice and knowledge for business owners. So I really appreciate you taking the time and speaking to me today. And looking forward to see what you have in store for us all next.
Well, thanks for saying that, and I just love sharing my story. Thank you.
Thanks.